Under Texas law, if you're charged with DWI, you're facing jail time, even if it's your first offense. My name's Trey Porter. I'm a criminal defense attorney. We fight DWI cases in San Antonio, Texas. This video is going to cover basically everything you need to know from start to finish about what happens if you or a loved one are charged with DWI in San Antonio. So after you're arrested for DWI in San Antonio, you're taken down to the magistrate office. And three things are going to happen. Number one, you're processed. This is what you see on TV. They're going to take your fingerprint, they're going to take your picture, and you're literally put into the system. Number two, you're going to go in front of a judge. He or she is going to tell you what you're charged with, and they're going to set conditions of your release as well as a bond amount that would have to be put up, or at least a percentage of what would have to be put up for you to be released. And then number three, you're going to be released through doing a bail bond or doing a PR bond, which is a personal recognizance bond. Or the other option is you can put up a cash bond, where whatever that number is that the magistrate judge has set, you can literally put up all of that money. So those are kind of the options as far as release goes. But again, everybody goes through the same kind of three-step process. Being processed and put into the system, appearing at some point before a magistrate judge, and then three, sorting your bond, and then eventually being released. All of this stuff together takes about 18 to 24 hours from start to finish in San Antonio. So after you're released from jail in downtown San Antonio, there are really three things you need to have on your radar. Number one, where's my property? You will be provided with paperwork. You should be provided with paperwork about where it is. Where was your vehicle towed to? Where were your personal belongings taken to? Typically, those are two separate places. So number one, you need to ascertain that. Number two, conditions, if any, of your release. This is the tricky part, because a lot of people are released with conditions and they either are not disclosed to you when you get out, or they are disclosed but not in a very kind of thorough way, and so you don't know about them. Common conditions of release for DWI in San Antonio are you have to immediately install one of those things in your car you blow into, the ignition interlock device. You have to do random drug testing, even for alcohol, even if you're over 21. You might have to call in and check in with a pretrial services officer. So you're kind of already being treated like you're guilty. So there's a bunch of stuff that you have to do. And if you don't do it, they will hold it against you. They do it every day. They revoke people's bonds and you go back to jail. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, you've got to figure out when your court date is. It's typically already going to be set, and you should have a piece of paper that tells you that when you leave. But that's a really important thing, because the last thing you want to do is miss that first court date, get off to a rocky start with the judge, and potentially have to go back to jail because your bond's been revoked. So I know it's a lot of info, but the three main things are find your property, figure out what your conditions of release are, and figure out when your first court date is. You are allowed to drive after a DWI arrest. A lot of times police officers or the internet or your brother-in-law who's been through this as well will tell you something that's not true. But let me tell you what is true. You are 100% able to drive after a DWI arrest. Your driving privileges, though, are subject to suspension. The folks in Austin are working to suspend your license, not because they think you're guilty or innocent, they don't care, but because of the technicality of either refusing to provide a breath specimen or providing one that's over the legal limit. So there is a way through that, through an ALR hearing. There is a way to drive legally after a suspension with an occupational license. These are important, technical, complicated things, and they're knots that attorneys that deal with this type of stuff can untie. But I'll just say this, everybody charged with DWI in San Antonio absolutely has a 100% pathway to drive legally immediately after their case, all the way through the pendency of their case, all the way through probation, all the way until you get your life back. Make sure you ask the right questions, and that way you can keep yourself safe. Only one important thing happens on your first court date for DWI in San Antonio, and that is you answering the call when the judge calls the docket. That's it. That's the most important thing. Otherwise, it's just attorneys conferring. Of course, there's frustration in getting in the building and parking and security and all that, so make sure you're early. But the number one thing is just making sure that you are present in your seat, as is a condition of your bond, when the judge calls the docket. That's it. Your case is not going to be figured out on the first court date. How long is it going to take? You know, I tell people 8 months to up to a year, sometimes a little bit longer. DWI cases in San Antonio move kind of slow. Part of that is, you know, we're just a big city. We have a lot of courts, but they're crowded and they're slowed down. And then the other part is really just evidentiary. You know, blood and breath results, they can take a long time to be analyzed and be turned over to the prosecutors and to defense. You know, so that's a big one, but also you want to be thorough. That's always the challenge, right? Like, you want it to be over as quick as possible, but you also don't want to sacrifice the best result just because you want it to be over with. So we always tell people, you know, it's important to take the time to get those videos, to review those reports, to look at those police, you know, incident logs and see if there's anything that can make your case better. So all of that kind of goes into it, and what that comes out at on average in San Antonio is about 8 to 12 months. Outcomes on DWI cases are evidence-based. Obviously, the best outcome obviously is a dismissal, and then the worst outcome would be conviction with jail time. Everybody facing DWI is facing jail time, up to 6 months or up to a year, depending on your BAC, no matter what your criminal history is and no matter how nice you were to the police. So what happens statistically, on average, is some type of probation. There are people who go to jail and are sentenced to jail for DWI first in Bexar County every day. And there are people who get their cases dismissed every day. But the majority of people are in the middle, and that's some type of probation. Important things to think about when that time comes is, what am I getting for participating in probation? You know, are you getting an opportunity to avoid a conviction, which can only be done through deferred adjudication? Or are you getting an opportunity not to go to jail just because your case is so bad? Those are important questions that you need to get answered with your attorneys, and those things take time because evidence has to be reviewed, and that's how you arrive at those options, and that's when you can make an important, informed decision. But just to recap on that, the overwhelming kind of statistical result for a DWI in Bexar County, at least as a first offense, is some type of probation.